Well, good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to this presentation on the narrative. This is the first essay that we will be doing together, and it's an assignment that will ask you to think back over your life and to choose one event that is significant, to remember it, and to tell that story for your reader. Why the narrative? Well, it's rather simple yet profound. Experience and understanding seldom coincide. Some wise person said that a long time ago, or maybe a not so wise person. Here we have time. We are all familiar with the timeline, and we can think about our life as a series of unfolding events, maybe some significant, some not so significant. But if you look at the timeline, let's say we marked by the horizontal line, we have an experience, say here. What we find, due to the nature of human experience, is that understanding oftentimes comes after, sometimes significantly after the event, after additional time has transpired. Then, and perhaps only then, we can look back after the passage of time and look back at the event and truly understand what the significance of that event was to the course of our lives. So we read and we write narratives always for two purposes: to remember and to understand. We read and we write narrative essays to remember and to understand. First and foremost, the process of writing an expressive narrative will help us remember and understand better ourselves. Who we are as adults is shaped by and large by the events that we have experienced, both the good ones and the bad ones. And I think this is true. If you think back over your life, much in the same way I do when I reflect on my life, I can identify significant events in my life that somehow changed me, changed the course, the direction of my life, made me see myself differently, or made me see perhaps other people differently. Or maybe an event that caused me to see the world that I'm inhabiting in a different way. So as you're sitting here watching this presentation, I want you to begin thinking about your life and reflecting on it and thinking about those moments, those events, those things that have happened to you along the way that have somehow shaped you. One important note to make here is that although the event that you are writing about is a personal experience, the writing of that experience is a public act. And so I say this just to caution you and to suggest to you that you only want to write about those experiences that you feel comfortable about writing. There are things that have happened in our past that may be too painful to write about. By the same token, I have had students who have written about traumatic things in their lives and who have come to me afterward and have said to me that the writing of that narrative helped them heal in a significant way because they'd had this event and the emotions that went along with the event bottled up for quite some time. Writing narratives also helps us to understand each other. And that's really, I think, where the true power of the narrative resides. It's because when we read narratives, other people's narratives, we find that we can understand one another better. We experience the emotions of empathy, of sympathy. We can experience another person's victories, and so forth. So, life is strange, and I'm very, very thankful that there are some experiences I have never had. There are some experiences I don't ever want to have. However, by reading narratives, stories of people who have gone through these experiences, I understand them better. and I can share, and my spirit and my empathy is broadened, my sympathy that I have, and I can understand people in a better way, in a more comprehensive way. And I think that's an important thing for us to do as we go through this life. What is a narrative, you ask? Well, a narrative, very simply put, is a story, and stories may take many different forms. We can experience stories in a movie that we go see, in a television show. We find stories in books and short stories. We might see stories presented on stage in the form of a play. We dream at night, and in our dreams there are narratives. There are stories in our dreams. History is just one long narrative, isn't it? And certainly religion, all the major religions of the world rely heavily on narrative, rely heavily on the telling of a story. A narrative essay tells us a story of a personal experience so that readers can participate in the experience. Finally, the narrative is expressive. That's one of the wonderful things about narratives, and one of the reasons why I enjoy reading them, why I enjoy writing them, why I think it's important as we begin the semester as writers. Why I begin with a narrative is because it's ultimately an expressive kind of writing. You don't have to go to the library to do this assignment. You don't have to talk to anybody else. You don't have to do any research. You have everything that you need to write this paper right inside your brain. Let's talk about the practical applications of the narrative form, or the narrative form of writing. Many professional fields rely heavily upon the narrative pattern or the narrative mode of written expression. If you stop and you think about it, think about the profession that you are in pursuit of, the career path that you see yourself going in. Chances are, whatever that career path is, it's going to rely on some kind of writing, and there are some professions that rely more heavily perhaps on the narrative than say other ones might. Insurance professionals will certainly write narratives. If you've ever had to file a claim and had an insurance agent come to your home and explain to them what happened with the accident or with the damage from a storm, the insurance agent ultimately crafts this into a narrative. Certainly the legal professionals, law enforcement professionals, when you are in an accident or a crime has happened, a report must be written, and that investigator or that detective or that police officer crafts a narrative. And so you learning and practicing some of the skills that are associated with narrative writing, I think will go a long way in helping you, no matter what profession you go into. Think about the medical profession. I know lots of you are probably interested in that profession. You're going to become nurses. You're going to become doctors. The narrative form is probably one of the primary forms of writing that you'll see in the medical profession, because you're having to write maybe at the end of a shift. You're having to write a report of what's happened on your floor or in this certain patient's during what happened on your shift to this patient. Narrate the events of the day, narrate what happened, what was the episode from the beginning to the end, so that someone coming on shift after you has an understanding of what's transpired. The basic features of a narrative. A very basic feature is that a narrative should be a well-told story. A narrative should also give a vivid, memorable presentation of significant scenes and people that are associated with the story. And finally, all good narratives will communicate at some level the significance, the autobiographical significance, why this event was important to you. If you have chosen an event, then there is some reason why you chose that event. The ultimate aim in this assignment is to communicate that significance, to tell the story in such a way that your reader knows, I get it. I can understand now why this event was important to this person. What's a well-told story? Well, a well-told story is one that's interesting. It's one that is entertaining and that is memorable. At base, if we think about it, if we think about all stories, and especially the stories that we remember, and the stories that are good, all stories have a conflict in them. For without conflict, you have no suspense. Suspense is that thing in a story that makes the reader want to keep reading. And if you have no suspense, you have no reader. So even though we grow up and we live day to day thinking that we don't like to have conflict in our lives, or we don't like to have drama in our lives, conflict is really, really important in our lives because that's what ultimately creates suspense, and suspense is what keeps us wanting to figure out what's going to happen. Now, obviously, we don't go out looking for conflict, but we often find it from day to day. Well-told stories also are marked by or distinguished by time markers. A story must contain within it some kind of language that pushes the story along, that reflects or presents the reader the idea that time has passed. And a time marker can be a simple phrase such as at 10 o'clock in the morning, or 2 hours later, the next week, finally, all these years later. These are phrases that mark and suggest the passage of time. And readers need to know when you are pushing the reader on through the narrative, through the story. If you think about it, every story is really made up, or I should say every event is really made up of smaller events that are contained within it. You just didn't get in an accident. That just didn't happen. That car accident actually contained smaller events along the way, right? You were texting. You were late for work. You did not see that the light had changed. And then you got into the accident. So, and then there's the aftermath of the accident. You went to the hospital. A police report was filed. You got your car fixed. So these are smaller events that make up the larger event that you're telling. A well-told story also will involve some kind of dialogue, and this is important. I look for dialogue when I read these narratives. What dialogue does is when a reader is reading an essay, reading a narrative, what the dialogue does is that it somehow, when you reconstruct and present significant conversations between you and another person involved in this story, something changes imaginatively in the reader's mind, because the reader moves to a different level of imagination, really. Because what happens is the story kind of slows down, and by reconstructing that dialogue, you are inviting and allowing the reader to really participate in the event as if he or she had happened to be there. So dialogue, think about the key conversations that happened, and then strive to include those in the reader. Because oftentimes the reader will have a more meaningful experience as he's reading or as he's experiencing the conversations take place. And that's what you want. That's what a well-told story is going to do. A well-told story is going to be one that people remember. And people are going to remember things that they feel as though they were a part of at some level. A vivid presentation of significant scenes in people. As I said, instead of generalizations, general statements, a skilled writer of a narrative will actually recreate the experience, letting the reader hear and see the action unfold, letting the reader hear and see the thoughts and the words. The skilled writer of narratives will use descriptive language and select important details that are memorable and vivid. Again, the idea is to reconstruct the event. Let me pause here and make an observation, and I don't know if I've got this in the presentation or not, but let me talk about this word event. An event is truly best if it's something that's happened within a very focused amount of time. Say, for example, a 24-hour time period. A 24-hour time period allows you, or should allow you, to truly narrate, to reconstruct what happened. You can't narrate your senior year in high school. Do you see what I'm saying? It's just too broad. You would just be writing in very general terms about what happened. But if you chose an event, the prom, a football game. Think of it this way. My parents divorced when I was young. That is an event that happened to me, and certainly a very significant thing that happened to me along the way. It certainly affected the way I think about relationships and marriages and fatherhood and so forth. Now, I couldn't successfully narrate my parents' divorce to you, though, could I? Not in any meaningful way, not in any memorable way, but what I could do was narrate the night that as a boy I knew that there was trouble in paradise and that my parents' marriage was going to end. I could do that. I remember the night. I could remember the fight. And I could remember my mother crying. I could remember my dad leaving. That night, I could narrate because it's focused. I could reconstruct it for you. I could tell that story. You see the difference? One is very general and really would be kind of boring to read and probably not memorable. But if I focused the event on one 24-hour time period, I could reconstruct it, letting you hear it, letting you see it, letting you feel it in a powerful way. All good narratives must, at some level, communicate the event's significance. Remember, this is why we read and we write narratives, or one of the reasons, right? Because we have things that have happened to us that are important. And what we're trying to do with the narrative is to communicate that, to make some connection with a reader. There are two ways that writers can do this. They can do so implicitly, or they can do it explicitly. In other words, we either show or tell the reader, or we do a combination of both. Showing is always the best because it's done through the dramatization of the story. We can see the important scenes. There's a typo in scenes. And we can see the people from the writer's perspective. Sometimes writers will tell, too. They will explicitly come right out and tell us how they felt as the action was occurring. They'll tell us why it was important or how they feel now as they look back on the experience. They might come right out in the essay and say, this event was important to me because it fundamentally changed the way I think about marriage, or something of the like. The artful writer renders this skillfully, not like a moral tagged onto a fable, right? The point is this, is that readers are smart people. If you've done your job as a writer, if you've done your job as a storyteller, you probably shouldn't have to tag on the end why this story was important. It's like someone who tells you a joke and you laugh, and then afterward the person tells you why the joke is funny. Right? The person shouldn't have to do that. If you've told the joke well and you've gotten a laugh, then your job is done. Does that make sense? Well, good. I'm not getting too senile. I did remember to include this on the presentation. Let's talk about some common trouble spots that are associated with narratives. It's funny, I've been teaching a long time, and what I find is that there are certain kinds of essays that produce certain errors. And so what I try to do in these presentations is let you know ahead of time kind of the trouble spots, the things to be on the lookout for as you attempt this assignment. Certainly, the focus. We've just talked about that. It is best to limit the event to no more than a 24-hour time period. Because if you go beyond that, you'll no longer be reconstructing the event. You'll be just telling it. So try to think about 24 hours. Okay? Check your verb tenses. For whatever reasons, this assignment causes students to go crazy with their verb tenses. Don't slip between the past and the present tenses. Use the past tense for events that took place in the past. If you are telling a story about something that happened to you last year, you must use the past tense in the telling of that story. Don't use the present tense. Don't say, I am walking down the street and I see around the corner a very strange-looking man. I say to myself, he looks dangerous. No, you're going to use the past tense. I was walking down the street when I saw a man walking around the corner. I said to myself, this guy looks dangerous. You see the difference? So that's just one of the things you want to do as you're proofreading and editing, is checking your verb tenses. Check also your punctuation and paragraphing of dialogue. That can be somewhat tricky. And for some models on how to do that, I might suggest that you look at some of the sample narratives that are in your book or that are online. And if you have any question about how dialogue is punctuated or paragraphed, and you can't find some kind of model in your book or online, shoot me an email and ask me if hey, have I done this right? And I can look at it and let you know how it looks. Okay? Sample narratives. It's always good before you set out to write something to take a look at some professional models, or maybe some of the student models that are in the text. I usually upload a few into our course. You might want to take a look at those as well. So certainly, before you sit down and draft your narrative, read a couple of them. That just makes good logical sense. It'll give you a sense of what a narrative should look like, how it should read, how it's formatted. And as you read them, pay attention to those things, those structural things that the writer has done in arranging all of the smaller events into one larger narrative. And as you read narratives, keep your eye out for those basic features that I've talked about in this presentation. You'll see them. And you will especially focus on the dialogue. When you encounter the dialogue as you're reading it in the samples, you'll see what I mean. You'll see that, okay, this is creating an illusion of reality. I feel like I'm right there in the action as it's taking place. Hey, the narrative's a great assignment. I'm looking forward to reading them. If you have any questions along the way, please don't hesitate to email me or post them on the discussion board. Have fun with this assignment. This is a wonderful assignment, a wonderful opportunity for you to look back, reflect a little bit on your life, to remember things, and to understand yourself better, to understand your world better. So, until next time, I'll see you soon.